Pieces about himself too. That he'd moved around a lot, that he didn't keep in touch with his family, that he never really felt at home anywhere. There was sadness in his voice when he said those things, a kind of emptiness that made me want to reach out and fill it. The strangest part was how natural it felt to be with him. I'd only known him a short time, but it was like he'd always been part of my world. I didn't want to admit it, but I was falling for him. Not in the silly, girlish way I'd fallen before. This was deeper, stronger, scarier. And yet, sometimes I felt uneasy. There were moments when his laugh sounded almost too familiar. When he tilted his head just so, I swore I'd seen that exact expression before. Déjà vu tugged at me in ways I couldn't explain. One rainy evening we sat side by side on the steps outside the library. The world was quiet except for the sound of water dripping from the gutters. He looked at me for a long moment, then whispered, "You remind me of someone I used to know." My chest tightened. "Who?" I asked softly. He looked away, his jaw tightening. "Someone from before." "It doesn't matter." But it did matter. It mattered more than I could put into words. Because in that moment, I realized the mystery of who Ethan really was had only just begun. The weeks that followed felt like a dream I didn't want to wake up from. Ethan had a way of making everything brighter, as if just being around him sharpened the world. Colors seemed deeper, laughter easier, silence less heavy. For the first time in my life I felt truly seen. We started spending nearly every day together. Between classes he would wait for me outside the lecture hall, leaning casually against the wall like he belonged there. At night, we'd walk through the quiet streets, sharing secrets under the glow of street lamps. I told him about my childhood, how I grew up in a small house with my mom, how my dad left when I was too young to remember. I admitted that there were gaps in my life, stories no one ever told me. My mom always brushed off questions about my father, saying it was better to leave the past behind. Ethan listened carefully, his eyes soft but unreadable. When I mentioned my dad, his expression always changed, just slightly but enough for me to notice. A shadow flickered across his face, as if I had touched on something he wasn't ready to reveal. One night as we sat by the river, I gathered the courage to ask, "Do you ever miss your family?" For a long moment he didn't answer. Then quietly he said, "Sometimes. But missing people doesn't mean you should go back to them." There was pain in his voice, a sharpness that cut deeper than I expected. I wanted to ask more, to dig into the mystery of who he really was, but something in his eyes told me not to push. Still, the more I tried to ignore it, the more curious I became. Why did he avoid talking about his past? Why did he look at me sometimes like he already knew me? Despite the questions, I couldn't stop the feelings that grew inside me. One rainy afternoon we found shelter in a half-empty cafe. The air was thick with the smell of cinnamon and coffee beans. As thunder rolled in the distance, Ethan reached across the table, his fingers brushing mine. My heart raced. I knew I should pull back, but I didn't. Instead, I let his hand cover mine, warm and steady. "You make me feel like I belong," he whispered, his gaze fixed on me. Something inside me cracked open. For so long, I'd carried the weight of loneliness, the hollow ache of unanswered questions. But with him, that ache felt lighter, almost bearable. We kissed that day. It was gentle at first, uncertain, but it carried a fire I hadn't known was possible. A dangerous fire that spread through me, leaving me trembling. But afterwards, when we pulled apart, I caught a look in his eyes that unsettled me. It wasn't just passion, it was fear. I wanted to ask him what was wrong, but he quickly changed the subject, asking about my classes, about the book I was reading. The moment slipped away, yet it lingered inside me like a secret I wasn't supposed to hold. The deeper I fell for him, the more I felt something hiding between us. A wall I couldn't see but always felt pressing against my heart. And then one evening as we walked back to my dorm, a woman stopped us on the street. She was older, her face lined with time, her eyes sharp and searching. She looked straight at Ethan, then at me, and her expression tightened as if she recognized something impossible. "You too," she muttered under her breath, shaking her head. "You shouldn't be together." Ethan's jaw clenched and he quickly pulled me away before I could ask what she meant. That night, lying awake in my dorm room, her words echoed in my mind. "You shouldn't be together." I didn't know it then, but everything was about to change, that I couldn't stop thinking about the woman's words. "You shouldn't be together." They played on repeat in my mind, every syllable digging deeper like a thorn under my skin. For days I tried to brush it off. Maybe she was just some eccentric stranger. Someone who saw two young people in love and felt bitter about it. But the look in her eyes, it was too sharp, too knowing. She hadn't spoken out of jealousy or spite. She had spoken like someone who carried knowledge I didn't have. Ethan, of course, avoided the subject completely. Every time I brought it up, he changed the topic, kissing me or making me laugh, distracting me until I almost forgot. Almost. One evening, I decided I couldn't hold back anymore. We were in his small apartment, curled up on the couch while a movie played in the background. I turned to him, studying his face, the strong line of his jaw, the warmth in his eyes, the way he looked both familiar and mysterious all at once. "Ethan," I said softly, "who was that woman? The one who stopped us the other night. Do you know her?" His body stiffened. For a moment he didn't breathe. Then he forced a smile, though it didn't reach his eyes. "She's no one, Jessica. Forget about her." But I couldn't forget. And I couldn't ignore the way his hand trembled slightly as he reached for mine. Something was wrong. The next day, while Ethan was in class, I found myself wandering toward the library, hoping distraction might quiet my restless thoughts. But fate had other plans. As I browsed the aisles, a stack of old yearbooks caught my eye. On impulse, I pulled one out, an edition from nearly 2 decades ago from a high school in the very town where my mother grew up. I wasn't sure why I flipped through the pages, but when I did, my heart nearly stopped. There, among the black and white photos of teenagers, was a face I recognized. Ethan's. Not exactly, of course. The boy in the photo was younger, softer around the edges. But the resemblance was uncanny. Same sharp cheekbones, same piercing eyes. The name below the picture read, Daniel Carter. My hands shook as I traced the letters. Ethan had told me his last name was Miller. Why lie about something so simple? And who was Daniel Carter? I snapped the book shut, my pulse racing. Suddenly, the air in the library felt suffocating. I needed answers, but I didn't know where to start. That night, when I saw Ethan again, I couldn't stop myself. "Do you have a brother?" I blurted out, my voice sharper than I intended. He froze. Slowly, he shook his head. "No. Why would you ask that?" But the hesitation in his eyes gave him away. I wanted to scream, to demand the truth, but fear pinned me in place. If I pushed too hard, would he leave? Could I even handle the truth if he gave it to me? Instead, I swallowed my questions and pretended to believe his denial. But inside, the cracks in our perfect story were widening, threatening to shatter everything. That night, I dreamed of the woman again, her voice whispering in the dark, "You shouldn't be together." When I woke, I knew I couldn't ignore it anymore. I had to find out who Ethan truly was, even if it destroyed us, that I couldn't keep living in the blur of half-truths and unanswered questions. The image of Ethan, no Daniel, stared back at me from that yearbook page every time I closed my eyes. Who was he really? And why would he lie to me about something so basic as his name? The next morning, I skipped class and went back to the library. My hands trembled as I opened the dusty yearbook again. Daniel Carter, class of 2005. Beneath the photo was a list of extracurriculars. Varsity soccer, photography club, student, none of it meant anything. Next to Daniel's name was another. Claire Cartsame. I felt the blood drain from my face. Could it be? I rushed out of the library and called my mom. She answered after a few rings, her voice cheerful. "Jess, sweetheart, what's wrong? You sound BR. So, I swallowed hard. I found an old yearbook. He looks just like Ethan." "Mom, who is he?" She hesitated for a long moment before finally saying, "Daniel was your uncle." Uncle. The word landed like a stone in my chest. My head spun. "But Mom, Ethan looks exactly like him." And my voice cracked. "Why does Ethan's real last name match his?" "Jessica," she said sharply, almost panicked, "you need to stay away from him. Do you hear me? Stay away." She hung up before I could respond. I sat there frozen, my phone heavy in my hand. My mom never lost control like that. Never. And yet she had sounded terrified. That evening, when I saw Ethan again, my heart was a battlefield. I wanted to demand the truth, to scream, to cry. But when he looked at me with those familiar eyes, my resolve wavered. Instead, I asked softly, "Your last name, it isn't Miller, is it?" He stared at me for what felt like forever. Then slowly he shook his head. "Why did you lie to me?" My voice broke. Ethan's eyes darkened with something I couldn't name. Shame, maybe, or fear. "Because if I told you the truth, you'd never look at me the same way again." Tears stung my eyes. "Then tell me now. Please. For a moment he said nothing. Then in a whisper he admitted, "My name is Ethan Carter. Daniel Carter was my father." The room spun. His father. Not his brother. His father. But if that were true, what did it mean for me? Why had my mother reacted the way she did? I wanted to believe that this revelation was the worst of it, that once the lie was out things would make sense again. But deep down I knew it was only the beginning. Because if Ethan was Daniel Carter's son, then there was still one terrifying question left unanswered. What was Daniel's connection to my mother? The words echoed in my head like a haunting melody I couldn't escape. My name is Ethan Carter. Daniel Carter was my father. I barely slept that night. Every memory I had with Ethan replayed in my mind, but they all felt twisted now, tainted by the weight of his confession. When the morning sun bled through my curtains, I finally made a decision. I needed answers from the only person who could give them. My mother. I found her in the kitchen, staring blankly at a mug of coffee that had gone cold. She didn't even flinch when I walked in. "Mom," I began, my voice trembling. "Ethan told me the truth. He's Daniel Carter's son." Her eyes closed as if she'd been dreading this moment for years. She whispered, "I hoped you'd never find out." "Find out what?" I demanded, slamming my hand against the table. "You keep telling me to stay away, but you won't tell me why. What are you so afraid of?" Her eyes filled with tears. She looked at me, not with anger, not with fear, but with guilt. "Because Jessica, Daniel Carter was your father too." The world tilted beneath me. My stomach lurched, and the air in the room seemed to vanish. "My father." I staggered back, shaking my head. No, that's not possible. "Dad. My dad, he's gone, but he was my father." She sobbed, covering her face with her hands. "Your father, the man who raised you, loved you more than anything. But biologically, Jessica, Daniel was your real father." The floor might as well have cracked open beneath me. My heart broke into shards so sharp I could barely breathe. The stranger I had fallen for was my brother. I wanted to scream, to run, to undo every moment I had ever shared with Ethan. But a cruel truth settled over me. I had loved him before I knew, and now that love had become my curse. Later that day I met Ethan one last time. We sat on a park bench, the silence between us louder than any words. "You know, don't you?" he said softly, not meeting my eyes. I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. "I didn't want to tell you," he whispered. "Because for the first time in my life I felt like I belonged somewhere. With you. And I knew that once you learned the truth, it would all be over." Tears streamed down my face, hot and endless. Why did it have to be like this? I choked. Why did we have to meet at all? Ethan reached for my hand, but I pulled it back. The pain in his eyes mirrored my own. "Maybe some things," he said, his voice breaking, "are never meant to be." I stood, my legs weak but my decision clear. "We can't see each other again, Ethan. Not like this. Not ever." As I walked away, the world around me blurred. I felt the weight of a secret I could never share, a love that had been doomed from the start. And though I knew I would carry the scars forever, one truth was undeniable. What began as love had ended as a forbidden tragedy, one that had shattered not just my heart but my very identity.